So welcome everybody. I'm Jenny and I'm co-founder of United We Own. And it's amazing to see so many familiar friends and faces, and also welcome to everybody that's new to United We Own. We are a 501c3 yoga and meditation not-for-profit, and we share trauma-informed and accessible yoga, meditation, and breathing with under-resourced and trauma-impacted communities. We're still doing it. I just at 11:45 finished a Karma project class with a homeless shelter for teenagers. They've been coming in once a week and really looking forward to it. So all the donations, the generous donations you've made are really still sharing the practice in those places, and important now more than ever. So I thank you. And on behalf of all the people that are still receiving yoga, I thank you so much. I'm going to take a deep breath. I invite everybody to take 3 deep breaths with me. I like to enjoy my breath in through my nose, out through my mouth. Let's enjoy 2 more breaths like that together. Okay. So we're here today to get into what I think is the most important work that we could be in right now in our lives, which is discovering or continuing to discover our own path of service. There are many people in this gathering today that have already been serving in many different ways. And there are many people on this call today that might be feeling like it's something they recently feel called to do, or something they've always wanted to do, and for various reasons haven't been able to take that first step. And there are people on the call today that serve a lot and might be feeling burned out right now from all of that service. And our time together today is me sharing my personal inner work and practices that helped me to walk to a place of service, and that allow me to keep evolving what being of service means, and to keep working in service in a way that's sustainable and nourishing for me, and not draining and harmful to myself. So that's the path we're going to go down together today. I'll mention before we dive into some philosophy a little bit about myself, because I think it gives good context to why I'm sitting here on this ottoman talking to you about this. So yoga for me was the thing that allowed me to break through a lot of mental health issues like depression and anxiety and an eating disorder, and also allowed me to find a place among my fellow human beings that I didn't feel separate, and I didn't feel other, and I didn't feel constantly obsessed with myself and all those things that come along with it, but felt connected and loved and loving towards everything around me. And that is an enormous gift. When I was teaching yoga in yoga studios, I got to a point where I felt like this practice meant so much to me, and it had done so much for me, that it wasn't acceptable to me anymore to just share it in a place where there were walls and boundaries that a lot of people that I felt could benefit from it couldn't access it. But the journey about how to share yoga for me, and on this call, we're not going to talk only about how to share yoga. We could talk about how to share food, how to share our time, how to share our energy, our love. For me, I discovered that what I felt like was essential in this world that I could offer was being able to access the self that we are that's connected to everybody else, the self that we are that in the now is okay. because it did that for me. I wanted to share it with everybody around me. But the journey of service can be tricky. It can be windy and twisty, and in many ways, challenging to navigate. And so the benefit of 6 years of kind of picking my way through this work, I've laid out into this roadmap that we're going to go on today, that I hope will either reinvigorate your ideas of how you could be of service right now, or help you to realize that it's just one step away, and then the next step, and then the next. How are we feeling about this? Give me a head nod if we feel good. All right. So I think that a good place to start is to just get some groundwork about what it means in our current day to be spiritual people, whether your spiritual practice is yoga or something else, and how this idea of being of service has changed in this modern world. So in yoga, which is our organization's background, if we look back at a lot of the yogic texts, like the Yoga Sutras, for example, which are a beautiful, beautiful collection of writing, even the Dhammapada by the Buddha, we can see that there's a lot of talk about the self. Did anybody notice that in the yogic texts? There's a lot of talk about like this, then you'll feel this with yourself, and you should focus on this, and then you may experience this, and then that. But recently, I've been thinking a lot about the context within which many of these yogic teachings, which as modern day yogis, we reflect to and refer to about what this practice means. And if you think back to the time of Patanjali, the Buddha, Jesus, many amazing teachers, what we know about that time is that the fabric of community, the fabric of tribe, the fabric of social support was very strong. We lived in small villages, and everybody had a role, and supporting this group of people that were aligned around a common goal and a common moral belief was a given. And so we could focus on the self because our fabric of connection to each other was there. But now, if we look at the world that we're in, this social connection, this unity and tribe can feel very hard to access. And the more we're separated off from each other during this current time of isolation, it can become even more challenging to feel that we're connected to each other, that we have support from each other, and that we're here to support each other. So an interesting thing I feel has evolved in yoga in the West, which is the danger of what I'll call spiritual materialism. Taking all of these teachings that were focused very much on the self and practicing meditation and feeling a particular way, or experiencing shavasana in a particular way, or mastering shapes in a particular way, has allowed us in many ways to turn our yoga practice into a way of chasing an experience. Just like we could fall into the trap of chasing a desire for a new car as a source of happiness. And I feel that a lot of current yogis sometimes feel very lost about what to do with all of this energy that we put into this practice. And like I show up on my mat and folks show up on their mat, and we do our pranayama and we do our meditation, and why? The question, why are we doing this? Why do we do all of this? Why should we practice a handstand? Why am I obsessing over whether I can feel a chakra spinning when I do this particular breathing? And I think to answer that question, again, we have to go back to the original purpose and understanding about who we are to ourselves and to each other. And that's how we as individuals and we as a yoga community can start to move past yoga as chasing self-experience or chasing something that feels good, and move back into what the roots of this practice are, which is acknowledging that we are all the same. Me, the tree outside, the squirrel in the tree outside, all of you. And that when we feel that connection in our very, very hearts, then we love and care and support each other without effort and without suffering. And in the Bhagavad Gita, which we'll talk about in a minute, this idea of being of service only from that place of seeing each other and loving each other as ourselves and loving ourselves as we love each other, that this is the path of karma yoga that leads us to freedom from suffering, which I feel is something that I know I constantly need to walk down. There's a lot of potential for suffering now, and there was when these books were written as well, and there still is now. It just looks different. So I would say that our modern work as humans is, instead of, as the texts seem to be saying, as to walk in towards ourselves and to study ourselves and to do this practice with ourselves, our work as modern humans and modern yogis is to walk into our hearts so that we can walk back out again to each other. And that's the practice that I hope to outline here today, because I know all of us have practiced walking home into our hearts, and now we can get better at walking out towards each other from that place. How are we doing? Okay, good. So I think it's always really wonderful for me every day when I wake up and I feel my mind sometimes twisty-turny to remind myself of these simple ideas of yoga and of so many other belief systems in the world. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. So the reason that I'm sharing my screen here is because we can get hung up a little bit in the West. I don't know, I'm not Eastern, so I can't speak to that, but in the West, we can get hung up on like memorizing Sanskrit words, and we really like want to like spell it right and all of that. So I've learned I don't have a whiteboard, but this can be our whiteboard for the moment. So if we look back at yoga's creation story, what we see is this idea that is maybe familiar. I'd love to hear from folks that know and love other creation stories too, that all things in the universe come from this one energetic source. And this word is Purusha. It's all things unmanifest. Don't worry, we're gonna get into this together, and we're gonna put our own words up there together so that it feels really relevant. So a word that for me comes up a lot when I think of Purusha is God. Another word that comes up for me when I think about this idea of Purusha is consciousness. And then, just so that we can fill out this next part of this idea, we have this other word, Prakriti. And Prakriti is all things manifest. So if in this idea of Purusha being the source of all things manifest, I would say that if God energy for me is the Purusha, the energetic field, then beings like humans, trees, squirrels, all of those things are manifest beings. Consciousness, we could say in yoga, there's a word also, Dharma, so Prakriti, could be Atman, our self with the big S. Let's do this. Self with the big S, Purusha. Self with the big S, Prakriti. Wait for it. We'll get there. Wait for it. So anybody else have any other words you want to just unmute yourself for this idea of Purusha in your life, this idea of this unmanifest field out of which all things manifest?
Cosmic force.
Ooh, love it. I'm not the best at formatting Word documents, and that's okay. Cosmic force. And I think that was Adriana's voice. What do you think, Adriana, might be like a manifestation in our universe? If cosmic force is Purusha, what could be like a manifest version of that?
Flowers.
Love it. Love it. Before somebody else jumps in, since Matt can't be here, I'll share for him. He likes to think of this as the wave, Purusha, the wave, Prakriti, the particle, for my science friends. Anybody else have a way that they think of Purusha or Prakriti? You can just unmute yourself and share it.
Love.
Love. Hi, Jafar. I know that voice.
Hi.
And what would be like our manifest?
Deeds.
Deeds?
Deeds, like actions.
Yes, deeds. That's what I thought you said. Love it. Beautiful. Okay, so let's just pause here for a moment, because there's another layer that is the last layer that we'll add on together before we start a little practice together. So in our yogic creation story, there's this energetic field, this God consciousness, cosmic force, a wave of love. And out of this energetic field come all things manifest. So out of this comes all of this. So what is then all of this really? What is all of this? What are all things manifest then? Go for it. Somebody go for it. What are all these things really?
Isn't that our experiences?
Ooh, that's what's next. Yes, that's what's next. But all of these things, so let me just...
Creations of Purusha?
Yes, yeah. It's all this, the God wave love conscious cosmic force. Yes, that's what yoga says. So very literally, if we're gonna walk this path where we're gonna practice yoga, then I think the essential aspect we have to all kind of get down with is that every blade of grass, let's all just look around ourselves for a moment. Maybe you have a window, maybe you're outside, maybe there's a plant in your room or a glass of water. Let's all just look around and see what around us is an object that's manifest, and settle on one and see if you can see it in this moment as Purusha. How do we look at it when we see it as Purusha. I mean, I feel like we could just stop there. It's a lifetime work, right? Seeing everything around us as Purusha. But we can't stop there. So this is the tangible idea around what all things manifest are here. But then, are we experiencing the world in the same way as the bird outside of our window? Shake our head yes or shake our head no. Who thinks they're, no, yeah. Yeah. We are not. We are humans. And so when we come into our human existence, we inhabit something we can call Ahamkara. I'll spell it for you. Ahamkara. Ahamkara. You don't need to know the Sanskrit though, but I like to honor it. It's important. So Ahamkara is our eye maker. We could call it our ego, but let's leave that word to the side for a moment because it comes with a lot of baggage. So Ahamkara is the part of ourselves. Also, we could call it self with the small s. So remember in our chart where we had Purusha, self with the big S. Then we had Prakriti, all things manifest. Still self with the big S, right? Because I could posit, I've spent a lot of time in nature the last 2 months, for better or worse, and I could posit that all the beings that I am living around are not experiencing life in the way that we are. Their experience is self with the big S. They are interconnected innately. They don't have to do pranayam right now. They're there. If you have an animal with you during this time, go to yoga class, like support yoga and all that, but also like go hang out with your animal because they will teach you yoga because they inhabit self with a big S every minute of every day. I see Morgan's dog behind her. That was kind of perfect. So self with the small s is the essential thing that allows me to draw a boundary between me and you, that allows me to say, it's not enough if Laura eats, it's not going to feed me. I need to feed my own body. I am a person that's walking around and I shouldn't walk in front of that car because that could be bad for me. All of those things that we need to do in order to survive and continue this moment of life, that's Ahamkara's job. But when we inhabit self with the small s, and we experience the world around us as self with the small s, how do we usually interact with the things around us? Like, for example, I'll give you something and then somebody can share how you would normally respond. A smell. What is a human response generally to a smell? Go ahead, Philip. Yeah.
Inhale deeper and identify it.
Wow. Not everybody's response to a smell, but okay, so we want to assign it. I love that. We want to assign. We want to label. What is that smell? Can I put that smell in a box with a name from my language? Makes me feel comfortable with it. Is our response to smell generally neutral? No. I see a lot of hands going no. No. Is our response to anything really very neutral when we're not practicing seeing things that way? Sounds, people, smells, thoughts, memories. So what happens with ourself with a small s is, as soon as we start experiencing the world, as yoga says we do through our senses, then we immediately end up in the like, dislike, attachment, aversion land. this is all really important to service. We might seem like, where are we going here, Jenny? But we're going there. Trust me. It's really, really important. So now we're inhabiting a world through our senses where every single thing we encounter, every manifest thing we encounter, our general responses encounter, attach, aversion. I like that smell. I don't like that smell. I want more of that smell. I don't want any more of that smell. I like the way that looks. I don't like the way that that looks. I'm going to go for more of that and do everything I can to keep this away from me. And this is one of the greatest sources of suffering that any human can experience. Reaction, grasping to something that we want, pushing hard away on something that we don't. And what it creates is a lack of presence and a lack of wholeness and a lack of acceptance. And what really has happened in our world, as we talked about a lot of yogic texts being written in a time when acknowledging each other as equals and important to each other was a much more relevant current understanding than it is now. What's happened is we forget who we all really are, very simply. And that our senses and our attachments and our aversions become a veil covering that whole left side of our chart, that whole God, wave, love, consciousness, cosmic force thing. And we start to see all things manifest as objects for us to either take or not want and push away. Does this experience sound familiar to anybody? I mean, most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, have at some point in our lives lived through a moment where every person and every object around us seemed to be about us, meaning Jenny. This person did this and it has to do with me. I like that, and so this is about me liking that, wanting more of that. And that leads us into this absolute tunnel of separateness and aloneness, where we feel like we're the only ones living here and everything else is just this cyclone of stuff around us. And the way that we walk out of that is by practices in which we can acknowledge who everything and everyone around us is and who we are. Where we're going to go right now is all about, the path that we're going to go on right now is really like a demystification of what it means to be a karma yogi and to be of service. And so as we hold the space here together, we can see this as an opportunity to minute by minute be of service to each other and how we support each other and how we share and how we listen. Because if you're doing that work of listening right now to each other, seeing and hearing each other with value, which is something Jafar taught us 3 years ago now in our first United We Own trauma-informed training, you are already on your path of service. So congratulations. If you were waiting for the first step, you just did it. And it was so easy, right? And it felt really natural. So something about discovering our place in service, and the way that we're going to walk through this next section, instead of Jenny as a talking bobblehead and we write notes, which is kind of the way I always shared it, but I've reimagined it now, is going to be in practice with each other. So if we think about Ahamkara, going back to the conversation that we had, we have our cosmic wave, God, love, force, and our wave. And out of that, we have all things manifest, Prakriti. And then we have ourselves, beings manifest, with added layer of self with a small s, seeing the world, experiencing the world through our senses, and through that feeling attached and hungry for some things and aversion towards other things. And here we are together. So I think the first part of starting to live in service and remember who we are is to experience who we are without being a doer. I feel like a trap that I fell into and still fall into with the service is constantly being in like the doing, churning, output, action place. We're going to walk our way through in the next little while through like what Dharma is and what karma is. But I think that now in this new moment, I have been remembering in myself how important it is to walk myself into my heart before I go into these big ideas. So what I'd love to do now together with you is for all of us to get on our yellow brick road from here back home to our very center layer, which is our connection to each other and to ourselves. And the way that I feel I begin to do this with my body, because we could see as if peace is what we want to see in the world, then that peace begins with our relationship with our own body. We can see our physical body and our relationship to it as an expression of our part in this. So a practice I would love to share with you, which you can do now if you're sitting in a chair, if you have a yoga mat nearby, or just like a carpet or a couch, you can walk away from your screen in any way that you would like. You could turn your camera off if you'd rather, or you can just kind of sit and be with us and try it later with the recording. It's totally up to you. So a way that I learned to inhabit my body long ago from one of my first teachers, Shiva Ray, was through natural spontaneous movement. And those of you that have practiced asana with me over my time know that it's core to who I am and how I interact with myself. The reason that this form of movement is so wonderful for yogis, for all of us, but for yogis in particular, is that we talked earlier about like yoga as spiritual materialism and perfectionism and attaining shapes and feelings and ideas. And when we move naturally, like the manifest beings that don't have a self with the small s and don't care about where their big toe is in downward dog, or like how stretched out their body is or how tight they feel. When we move like animals, I'll say, we can start to tap our way back in underneath that self with the small s and start to feel who we are when we're being. How does this sound? Like, Jenny, I have no idea what we're about to do, but let's go. All right. So here's how. Yes. Here's how. So if you have an animal, if you've ever seen an animal, which I hope everybody has at the zoo, on a nature show, in your house, the best way I can describe this is we're going to embody ourselves in the way that our animals do, without inhibition and without grasping for shapes. So I'm going to start seated, and then I'm going to move over to my yoga mat just so that there's lots of options. You can stay seated. If you feel moved to get down on the ground with me, you can. So finding any comfortable way to be in your space right now, seated, and then imagining your gaze can be open, your gaze can be closed, you can go back and forth. Imagining, just like an animal, you can bring the image of any animal that comes to you, a lion, a cat, a dog. Mammals are helpful for us to imagine because we're mammals. Chimpanzee. And just imagine how that animal would sit down into what they're sitting on. So right away, notice if you have like a good yoga student perfectionism going on in your seat. Like, are you like, okay, my elbows are under my shoulders and the back of my neck is long and my knees are below my hips, and just take a big breath in and just like let that go and just inhabit your seat like a chimp or, yeah. So I see some people have already started moving. Oh, what does this tell us about? And so in life, we're never frozen. Really, life is always moving. It's never frozen. So now the first thing you could do to join me is to start a gentle rocking. And the way that I like to imagine this is that I'm seated on a raft or a boat or something over an imaginary, peaceful, safe body of water. If water is not a safe image for you, you can let another image rise up for you. And I like to feel that natural rocking arising from the base of my seat. And now I bring my awareness to my spine. And there's a beautiful tantric yoga sutra that says one can meditate as if your spine is the smoke rising from the stick of incense. And so from that rocking at the base of your seat, see if you can let go enough for your spine to feel as if it's a stream of smoke rising up. Notice if you're gripping in your belly. See if you can soften your belly. And now allow the movement to permeate your body. So see if instead of your mind leading your body, instead of your mind saying like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I did this now? Every time that comes up, see if you can just let that, like see it and just let that float past as the doer. See if you can soften all the boundary of your body enough so that you are along for the ride. Your body is moving in its own wisdom and you are inhabiting it. You are being it. And I love everybody that turned their screen off because it is a thing about being watched. So spontaneously, if you feel like other parts of your body want to join in, if your arms want to join in, but remember, I'm gonna head back to my mat and you can stay here with this, or you could like melt your way down onto the floor if that was gonna feel good to you. Remember how a dog or a cat or a tiger experiences being. And they are not performing downward facing dog and like pressing here and lifting there. So if there's space, maybe you could, if it would feel good, experience a downward facing dog like your dog does, where you just be in the shape. And my one ask is that we keep this wave of movement going because we are 70% water. We're water beings, and every time we want to stop in a place and perform a shape or do something we think is right or wrong, we lose the tether to being. Just being. And if you're seated and you're in your flow, if you've moved your being down onto the ground and you're in your flow, I'm just going to take about 5 or 6 more breaths. Continuing to soften, continuing to do less, to feel more. Notice the tongue, if it can soften. Notice the eyelids, if they can spread. And when you feel, this is my practice, so I'll say when I feel that I've tapped in to a layer of being, when my doing mind and my judging mind has quieted and I feel that I'm moving in layers towards my heart, I practice what's called a pranam. And you can do this with me if you're seated, and you can do this with me if you found your way to the floor. And pranam is a gesture that goes across systems of learning. It goes across religions. It's really ancient and innate, I think, as humans. And if you're seated, you can bring your palms together in front of your heart. And if you're found your way to the ground, you can lower your whole body down to the ground. Take your palms together and extend your arms over your head and let your forehead come to rest on the mat. And we'll be here for a few breaths. And see how much you can continue to surrender to the idea of Purusha. Every time you feel a doing rising, a thought that's about self with a small s, and this moment when I practice pranam in whatever way it is a moment that I feel my place among my ancestors, among all the brave human beings that came before me, among the animals, the earth, all beings manifest, and that unity that we all are unmanifest. And I feel with my whole body, if you're seated, you can lower your head to your heart, bring your gaze from your mind into your heart. And I let this be a prayer with my whole body, a prayer with my breath, that I can live and act from a place of service. And although myself with a small s likes to try and tell me that I am the most important thing in the world, when I practice my pranam, I gesture to the world with my whole body that I am one and the same and equal to the squirrel, the grass, the tree, and the person that's really angry in traffic too, that person too. And now for our next moment or two, I invite you to allow the pranam to move into a comfortable way of being, whether it's being seated and letting your hands rest, or if you're on a couch or a floor, you may decide to roll over onto your back and rest in a way where the shape is unimportant, as we've discussed. trust that you know how to be. Lead with your body and your heart. So we've talked about this origin story of yoga, and now in whatever restful place you are with your body, we're going to experience this idea of Dharma. So Dharma is a law. It's a law that holds that we are all interconnected. Sounded like a really big word before maybe, but now we know it's very simple. And the way I love to teach Dharma is imagining that there's a big, beautiful bubble. Some people are visual meditators. So maybe you want to picture a bubble. I'm not visual, so I just feel this idea of a bubble, a big bubble. And since we are all interconnected, you can imagine what happens when the bubble is tapped in a place. We can feel this in our own bodies. Maybe even now you've noticed a little tension comes into one part of your body, a shoulder lifts or fingers clench or the eyebrows come together. And it's impossible to isolate that from our body because our body is just like that universal bubble, all interconnected. And so we feel that anything that happens in this body ripples through all the layers of our being. So the law of Dharma is a tap on any part of the bubble ripples through the whole bubble. But there's also another idea of Dharma that I want us to be with here in this space before we come back together as a group. Another translation of Dharma is that which supports. That which supports. It means that which is so essential to a being that without that quality, they wouldn't be the being that they are. We can say that whole species have dharmas, but we're here to talk about our own path. And if you need to start that spontaneous movement again because you feel yourself kind of crept into the doing perfection place, you can always just kind of like rock your head a little. I have to do that for myself a lot. So in this work, receiving what's called spanda in yoga, or the inspiration that comes from purusha instead of the deciding that comes from Ahamkara, our small self. So I challenge you to not assign something here, but to breathe and receive the answer. Let's all ask ourselves, what is so core to our own selves that without it, we wouldn't be us? Or another way that you can think about it is, when you're not in the room, what is missing? And every time something comes up that you feel is actually your mind trying to solve the problem or pick the right answer, you can let those kind of float by and wait. Wait for the thing that you feel resonates in your body, in your heart. And when you feel that something has resonated in your body and your heart and it feels true for today, you can allow yourself to witness how it might change the feeling of your breath, to acknowledge that part of yourself. Allow it to change the way you feel, you inhabit your body. And then allow some movement to come back into your body. And as you do, try to continue to dip yourself back down into that being place. And if you are someplace other than your seat, you can stay with our animal thing. Your camera's off. You can like crawl your way towards your camera, roll your way towards your camera and your computer. And if you're sitting, you can make any movements you need so that you can start to come back and arrive back together as a group. And whenever you're ready, if you'd like to, you can turn your camera back on so that I know that you're ready to take that into this next practice. How we doing, everybody? Thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right, as we let friends join us in their own time. So we'll get here, but that's the practice that I do as many times a day as I need to. Because as we'll talk about now, it is very easy for us to fall into the trap of service, of moving from self with a small s. And that's when service can be not really service. And that's when service can be something that drains us and harms us. So let's talk about Dharma really quickly. We hear this idea of Dharma. It's my Dharma. And in English, we could translate to what is commonly expressed as like, this is my purpose and this is my work. And I used to feel about Dharma that, I'd be like, well, today my Dharma is that I'm going to help everyone feel better by practicing yoga. Like that's like where I was like 5 years ago. But when I discovered what the definition of Dharma really was, that it's not something that we choose with our self with the small s. It's that which is already innate and essential to us. And did anybody feel like does anybody want to share what arose for them that was core to them, that was essential to them? You can just unmute yourself and popcorn.
I felt a sense of connection and some memory that went with that about times I've connected to nature, the memories, and like I said before about the pepper plant and that sense of connection to the oneness. I see that when I let myself, and then I find a lot of resistance to it at times. But that's what came up today was remembering, because I've been feeling disconnected, that actually that's innate. That's what it is. Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else have a moment of like, oh, that's what's essential to me? Or maybe we're all just feeling like we want to sit with and in the quiet. Yeah.
Listening kept coming up as I was kind of like letting this come to me, and listening is like this essential thing that I like honor myself for showing up for a lot of people. And that's something that I think I do well, is I allow myself to listen and people be heard. But it's also the one thing that I struggle with the most, like listening when I need to listen for myself, and when it's my turn to like, how does my body feel? How do I feel in this moment? And it's something that I like go hand in hand with. And that's why yoga is so important to me, because like listening to what my mind is saying, like what my body is saying, and just being able to like provide that to others too.
Beautiful. We don't spend a lot of time like asking ourselves these questions about who we are, but you know, we can't serve from who we are unless we take that time to acknowledge, like, what is it about us that, you know, that's missing when we're not in the room. So this is something that, you know, I encourage you to continue to let kind of like percolate in your practice, you know, like, who am I at my very core, you know, in that way. So the next part of this, Jafar. Yes, Jafar has his hand up.
Sorry for raising the hand late. It was a reminder to me that I really can only offer what I have inside. Meaning that as I was moving, it just reminded me that you know, this idea that I can only grow or be in service to as many beings or to as many parts of existence as my core is strong, as I am strong. So it reminds me that, you know, as much as I want to give everything all the time, that it's very easy to find ourselves, or to find myself, withering inside because I don't allow myself enough. So that little bit of movement just brought me back to that place. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing. I know we all feel you on that. Leah.
I wanted to share before, when you were doing the visual bubble and how each ripple affects the entire bubble. I think we all can agree that we connect to that. But you said if you aren't visual for yourself, your experience is that you could feel the bubble. So it made me, I literally felt within the whole bubble of, which didn't have a boundary out here because I'm outside. So it's kind of a privilege to be out in nature and feel that bubble. But then you asked, on top of all of that, you asked, so what would it be like if you left a room? Like, then what? And so at first it was, well, if I can't, you know, when I'm in the room, which is typically in the family kitchen or with the family, I want everyone there to know that I see them and that I hear them, right? But when I leave the room, I want them to still feel that they're seen and heard. And I think that it really sums up this whole idea of service from a place of Dharma. So thanks for allowing us to tune into feeling rather than seeing, because I also don't close my eyes and see that I could feel everything. Like right now, I can't close my eyes and still see the trees behind me, but I feel them, right? Thank you, Jenny, and everyone else.
Patricia wanted to share.
It's interesting also because I also had something that resonated for me through the idea of the bubble. At first, when you talked about, and you posed the question, what happens when you touch the bubble? My first thought was, it pops. And then I was like, okay, sit with it. And then what my thought that came to me is, I remember when my kids were little, there was this certain kind of bubble solution that didn't always pop when it was touched. Then it could settle places, and it was like almost like the magic bubble that could land on their fingers, and just the idea that it didn't pop when it was touched. And so what was coming to me was that in doing karma yoga and in yoga that we're trying to do, especially in trauma informed, that it's that quality that we might bring to it that doesn't pop the individual's spirit or make them want to pull away that that individual part of us. So that's what was coming to me, that in that idea. And also thank you for bringing me away from that whole idea that when you touch a bubble it pops, to sometimes it creates a ripple and it continues to move along. So I was thinking.
Share it that way, and that's really beautiful, Patricia. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. All right, so the next piece of understanding how we take this knowledge about ourselves and walk towards each other with it is this word that we hear a lot of, karma. So instead of taking time to kind of like do the 20 pop culture definitions of the word karma that we all may have heard or may know, we'll just kind of get right into my understanding of karma in terms of this work. So karma is also a law, just like dharma. And it's a law that every action that happens, everything that's done, has reverberations. It's the tap on the big non-popping bubble, the big science museum bubble that you can tap. So all that tapping around the bubble that ripples around, that's like a good way of thinking of karma. And the image of karma that I really love, that's from Eknath Easwaran's translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the one that I love so much, is that karma is like an energetic seed packet. And there's a lot growing around us right now, so it's really easy for us to imagine this, I think. So let's walk back for a moment. A lot of the time we translate karma as action, but there's a precursor to that that's even more important. What prefaces all action for the most part? Something that's manifest, something that's Prakriti, but much more subtle and requires meditation practice to be aware of. Anybody? Awareness, intention, yeah.
Prana?
So, thought. Our thoughts. So, before action, there's a thought. Karma starts with that thought, not with the action that we choose to take or not based on that thought. And every thought is, you can imagine, a little energetic seed packet. And just like an acorn that would fall off an oak tree and plant it in the soil, we could like sing and dance and like read it stories about how it's going to grow up to be a rose bush. We'd be like, you're going to be a rose bush. It's going to be so beautiful, rose bush. But will that acorn ever grow to a rose bush? Will it? No. And just like that, every seed packet, every thought is a seed packet that can only grow to be the tree from which that plant, from which that seed packet is. So what happens is, how many thoughts we have a day? This is Matt's territory. He has the number memorized. Like, anybody know this off the top of their head? It's like, like 80,000 thoughts a day or something unbelievable like that. So the teaching of karma is that it's not just the actions we take, but it's all the thoughts that we have all day long that come from that self with the small s place. Every single time we plant a little seed packet, a little karma seed packet over our lifetime. And every time that we buy into the thought or act on the thought, we water the seed. And not only do we water that seed, plant it and water it, but we water all of those oak trees that came before. So for an analogy from my own personal life, I share this a lot. For me, my karmic seed packet that I plant a lot is I'm not enough. So my little like self with the small s thing that I do is I go like, oh, I'm not enough, and I plant it and I water it, and then I water all the way. So if I can imagine my internal karmic forest, it's like these like ginormous oak trees of not enoughness from like when I was little, and like going, down to like the new ones that I'm planting every day. And what happens in this analogy, I like to think of like when we have a clearing, it's very easy to see where we are. But when we're deep in the forest, it's dark and we can't see past. So the more karmic seeds we plant and the more we water them and the ones before, the bigger this forest grows up around us and keeps us from being able to see who we are and who everybody else is. So interestingly, thoughts and actions that arise out of selflessness don't plant karmic seeds, and they also don't water them. So this journey of karma yoga is internal or external. If we were going to think about what this work is so far and like how we've been in it, would you say so far that the work that's here as a yogi who wants to be of service is about other people outside of us or about our own selves? Our own selves. Internal. So if we have two paths here, and one path is we keep going with the self with the small s, and we keep having these thoughts that arise from self with the small s, and we plant those seeds and we water those seeds and we grow those trees. Or we have a practice that allows us to create a permeation around those thoughts so that we can say like, oh, is that a thought I want to buy into? Or is that a thought that I don't need to buy into? And the more that we honor the thoughts and the actions that aren't about our own selves, the less, well, what happens to a plant when you don't water it? It shrivels and it dies. And that's the process. So let's look at this in terms of being of service, because that's what we're here to talk about today. Here's an interesting question that we may have encountered. When we approach service as self with a small s, here are some things that could come up that could generate karma, generate this kind of dark forest for ourselves. I want to help the people. I need to help people. This person needs help. I'm here to help. I want to help. So if we think back to our earlier understanding, help is not something that we can do. We can't help another person because we don't have anything that another person doesn't also have. In seeing other people as needing our help, what we're actually doing is planting a self with a small s seed and watering it. We're planting a seed of, I have something other people don't have, or the way I like it this way, and I think they need to have it this way too. This comes up with service all the time. One of the biggest sources of suffering that can happen in service is that instead of, like we've been talking about, asking and listening, how can I serve you? What can I do to support you? Sometimes we have a thought of like, well, let's use yoga as an example. I'm happier and I feel better because I do yoga. So I practice yoga. So I'll help the people and then they'll practice yoga and they'll have an experience that's like mine. And I've decided that's a better experience than the experience that the person is having. Is this making sense? A little bit? So this is a way that in service, we can actually be planting karmic seeds. And just like going back to our understanding of the bubble, if we are practicing something that isn't liberating us, then the work is moot because we're tapping our bubble of suffering, our internal bubble of suffering. So the first thing we really need to do in karma yoga and service in general is to put a practice in place. Breathing, meditation, movement, walking, journaling, where we can create the space to see the thoughts as they rise and to only act on the thoughts that we acknowledge are coming out of our being place, our self with the big S place. That's the spanda. So if any of us have ever been in prayer, in meditation, in a state of yoga, of complete immersion in the present moment, raise your blue hand or your real hand or nod your head if you've had one of those like inspirations come in. Everyone's like, yeah. So that's a thought. Yes, I can repeat that. So if you're in one of your moments of breathing, yoga, prayer, or yoga meaning like you could be like sitting in a field or playing with children, you're completely immersed in the moment. You're not in a doing, you're in the being that we were all inhabiting earlier. And you have one of those like inspirations, and it feels like it just comes into you from someplace. So those are the thoughts and inspirations that we receive. So we're not deciding, right, in those moments like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and do this thing. We're like, oh, yes, that's what I'm going to do. Yes, that feels right. That feels right to me. So the first way that we can start to find out what those actions are we want to take is by letting ourselves practice, because only when we get into that state of presence and being can we even receive these inspirations from our heart of what the action is that is in service to all. I see some hands up. Lindsay. No. Okay. She was just saying, yes, I know that feeling. Okay. Julie, are we just saying we know the feeling? Okay. We're saying I know the feeling. Okay. So let's just take one brief moment here with our journal or in our space to ask ourselves, what is our main karmic seed that I am planting and watering right now? What is the thought, the core bija, the seed thought that's coming from my self with a small s, that's rising, and maybe that I'm buying into, so I'm planting and watering? And this is something that we ask ourselves many times, very often, and we're aware of. And how this translates into the work is a knowing that we have no control over the outcomes of our actions. The only thing we have power over is our intention. So service begins with acting with intention that's aligned with knowing that we are all one and the same, all beings, and that our role here together is to live out the very core of ourselves, Anandamaya Kosha, our love and interconnection. Biologically, energetically, it's what human beings are programmed to be. Together, connected, bonded, loving each other, being loved. So the thing that I hope everybody walks away with today, and we have more to talk about, is that this is every minute of every day. So already we know how to be radically in service, like with the next food order we make. That's an action, right? Or like the next thing that we decide to purchase or not purchase, or the way that we interact with any of the humans that we'll interact with in any way. Karma yoga, the practice of arriving in inhabiting and embodying a state of full immersion in the present moment, full knowledge and connection of who we all are, through seeing thoughts that arise and choosing to act upon the thoughts that are in service to all, to the whole, because that is the truth of what this universe is, of who we all are. So it's really not fancy, and you don't need to form a not-for-profit, and you don't need to like have a big numbers that you can share. Actually, let's talk about that. What if I did a huge fundraiser to share masks with frontline workers right now, except I did it from a karmic seed of see me, look at me, see me, see me. And so I did all of that work from a place of like, look at me, tell me I'm good, see me, right? And I like posted about on social media, and I got money to send like 10,000 masks to a hospital. And everybody was like, good job, good work, but what's happening inside of me? Am I free? Am I more free? Or am I suffering and planting and watering my seeds? I'm suffering. That's a suffering. I think a lot of us know that suffering, you know, of like, I want to do this, but it's actually coming from a place of needing to be seen or trying to convince myself that I'm enough or convince other people that I have value. This is the dark and twisty trap that we can fall into. And if this universe is a bubble, like the law of Dharma says, then if I'm suffering, I'm contributing to the suffering. My own suffering is just as important as any of the beings that I might possibly have supported. Did my actions have a positive outcome? Yes. That's a beautiful thing to do. But karma yoga is 90% inner, 10% outer. That's the path of karma yoga. Don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to think about, okay. So now let's get our paper back out, or let's go back out into our own space. And before we do that, let's just tap back into our being state. So if you want to stay seated, if you want to lie down, let's soften the boundaries of our body and begin to allow a little bit of movement to arise. Movement not for the sake of movement. Movement as an experience of letting go. Movement as an experience of beings that are constantly shifting, changing, moving away from the past, not searching for any particular future that we've decided looks good to us. Being here right now. Starting with the experience of our body. Being in our body. Moving to the experience of receiving our breath. Little by little softening and seeing if we can catch a glimpse of a breath that flows in or out on its own. And from this place, let's all ask ourselves, what is in my way? What is in my way of being of service? Maybe it's fear that we won't do a good job or we're not enough. Those are karmic seeds. Or maybe it's that we're afraid the change we can make isn't big enough, isn't good enough, our attachment to an outcome. Or maybe we have fear. Maybe we feel separate from the people that we want to serve, and we feel afraid that we won't be accepted. And now, seeing those attachments or seeing those karmic seeds and thoughts, let's practice not buying them, not planting them, not watering them. Instead, receiving the breath and being in the body, let's ask, how can I serve? How does my heart want to serve? With no attachment to the answer, no attachment to what we want our service to look like, or be, or feel like. Today, what's one way that I can serve the whole? Just another breath or two. And when you're ready, we can start taking that moment that we were in and bringing it back to each other. And take each other in. And let's raise our blue hands if we received how we could be of service today. If we received something. And then we'll just call them out to each other. Pamela.
Oh, I didn't know I was going to have to share. Let me think.
Oh.
Come back to me.
Raise your blue hand. Okay. Raise your blue hand if you feel like you want to share it. Lindsay.
I can start planting kinder seeds for myself and sharing better for others.
Yes. Yes. Can we get a yes? Anybody? Yes. Patricia.
What was coming to me was just be. I don't have to try so hard, just be me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Alessandra. Okay, just unmute yourselves.
So, no, I was just feeling really emotional because I think that you nailed it by saying we need to help ourselves in order to be of service to others. And that's what I've been missing. I've been missing the point. It's like, if you want to help others, you have to start with you. And thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Woo! Awesome. Big one. Awesome. Adriana.
What's coming up for me is that I can say no, and that in saying no, when I really mean it, is in service to me, but also in service to others. Because how many times do I say yes and then show up in a way that's not whole? You know, that's not the truth.
Mm. Yes, Michael Stone talks a lot about we have many, many impulses, thoughts, and inspiration throughout the day. Our role is to have a practice so that we can feel in our hearts and our bodies what are the things we're going to act on. Not acting on every single thing. It just like comes into our sphere. Absolutely. That's huge. Yes. Leah.
So in the moment out here in the sun, in nature, I say, you know, it gives us an opportunity to practice and get still, find your spot. Like you said, where is that, where you get to practice? So clearly for me, it's outside in the garden or in nature. The birds, they sing beautifully. So maybe when I speak, I try to sing as beautifully as the bird. And the sun is super warm and it feels really good. So I want to be warm like the sun, you know. So I'm going to keep practicing acting off the thoughts that are beautiful, sound great, and feel really warm. Thank
you. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You have the answers always. Jafar.
That the service doesn't always have to be so big, meaning I can share less to be in more service. That I don't have to drown people in information and ideas in order for the service to be profound.
Mm. Mm. Yes. Does anybody feel like they have an internal sigh of relief about being able to begin to serve now from ourselves? That it doesn't have to be like, okay, what is this huge service thing I'm going to do that's going to help all the people and like fix everything and like, right? How many times is that the stumbling block to us? So let's talk about a couple things, and we can also share some ideas. Let's talk about a couple ways that we could get into service that's really important right now without suffering our own suffering, without planting more karmic seeds. So here's some fabulous things that we can do. If you're practicing karma yoga, then every action you take is of service. So I'll posit to you that the person that Philip reminded us exists earlier, the very angry person, who we know is actually just caught in a very, very painful experience of, I want this, I don't want that. I want this, I don't want that. Why is this happening to me, me? Because it's so easy to forget who we are in the scheme of this world. That our kindness, our compassion, not empathy, right? Empathy is, I feel everything you're feeling. And that's not really helpful, because that is what leads us to burnout. And those of us that are in this work, any kind of work of serving, know that it's what Katie was talking about earlier, right? Like, you know, I am having an okay experience right now. I am aware that there are thousands of people that are suffering, really suffering right now in lack of food and lack of income and illness and fear and all kinds of things, right? So either I could allow myself to be buried under the tsunami of empathy, which leads me away from feeling peaceful, connected, happy, purposeful, right? That doesn't serve anybody, because now I'm tapping the bubble too. I'm like joining in the bubble tapping, right? So instead, we can have compassion for other people that are suffering, meaning we understand, and we show up to support how we can, but we don't need to take those emotions into our own bodies and experience them in order to be supportive. We're of better service if this is Ahamkara, like this is the body of Jenny, this is the energy of Jenny, and it doesn't serve anybody for Jenny to take on pain and suffering when I have tools not to right now in my moment. So a lot of the time we have these ideas of like certain people that deserve our service and people that don't, right? So the first thing that we can do is challenge ourselves that every single person we encounter, we try and take that space from our reactions to them to acknowledge that they are the cosmic love wave too. All those words we put up on that chart. They are that, just like we are, just like the squirrel. And show up and support them without attachment to outcome, with intention of being in service to the whole, which includes everyone, including people we don't agree with. Right now, there's a lot of that. But the people that we don't agree with are also the same cosmic love wave that we are. And so we have to find a way to be supportive without attachment to changing people, fixing people. Nothing is broken. Nobody is lacking. All that we all need collectively is a way to remember who we really are, to find our connection to each other. And there are really small, beautiful steps we can all take in our lives right now. For example, there's a lot of beautiful nonprofits. There's a lot of small businesses and people, like we're in the yoga community. There's yoga teachers and yoga studios, and yoga nonprofits and food banks and all of these things. And it can start to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have so much to give. Many of us are in a place of economic uncertainty. And if we do something to ourselves that causes us suffering, right? So should we take the money that we need to be able to eat food this month and feel pressure to have to give it to others? Is that balanced? Or are we tapping that suffering bubble, right? So what can we do? Maybe we can look at budgeting ourselves for the month. I think it was actually Pamela who taught me this first. Take a look at what you spend every month. And maybe there's something that you have that's in service to self with small s that you could put aside and take that same $8. I think a Starbucks is like $8. Let's start there, right? So if I say like, I'm not going to buy myself the $8 Starbucks this week, instead I have $8 that I can share with my local food bank. I have $8 and I can add 4 extra cans onto my next food order or shopping and drop off at my local church or someplace that people are being fed and cared for. It doesn't need to be that we solve all the problems. It just needs to be that we do what we can to support others. And when we start taking those little steps, it becomes a way of life and not something that feels like it's full of pressure or obligation. If you don't have money to share and you don't have food to share, you can share your time and your love, which I think right now is one of the most important things that we can share. So you could do something like reach out to a local senior home or a school or a group home, and you can offer to spend 30 minutes a week playing the piano and singing a song to them or reading a book or something like that. Because when we remove ourselves from this pressure of like the service that I do has to be this like epic world-changing service, which really are instincts that come from self with a small s, we then see all of these actions that we could take right here today, like being here with each other and listening to each other. So we're at time, and we like to keep time here and honor everybody's time. I'm going to take a few deep breaths. I invite you to join me. I'm going to bring my hands over my heart, the very center of who we are. And when we put our hands a place, the teaching is it helps us to bring our awareness there. And we can close with this imagining that from our heart is an invisible thread like a spider silk. And you can imagine this thread of spider silk connecting to the hearts of some of the people that are here in this course, connecting to the tree out your window, or your pet or your family member that's in the other room. And allow silently from your heart a message like a little drop of rain on a spider web to slowly move from your heart to yours. Something like, I love you. I'm here for you. Words of your own. Allow your breath to move around the space of your heart and for those messages to silently transfer and transmit. And now acknowledge that there is a thread coming into your heart from the people gathered here this afternoon, from the tree outside, from your pet, your family member, the sun, the greatest unconditional love, the sun. And allow yourself to receive those messages being sent and transmitted from your fellow beings to you. And acknowledge what it feels like in your body, in your breath, in your heart to receive that. And come back together. Thank you so much, everyone, for your passion and your desire to show up for your fellow beings. Everybody that was here, I'm deeply inspired by all of you. I'll share my email address with you, so if anybody has anything that comes up or wants to brainstorm an idea or just wants to share, talk more, I'm here to support you in your service in whatever way that I can be. And most of all, I want everyone to know that you're seen and deeply loved by me and by everybody else that was here today, and by so many beings in this world. That you are enough, that you're important, you're essential. I think our only limitation is our own selves. So I love you. Thank you.